And we are live. And Ro will be here. He is just having technical difficulties. So we will make fun of him mercilessly. Oh, now he's there. Can we hear you, Ro? Ro? Ro. Okay, well, Hans, how are you doing? Let's make fun of Ro while he can't, say anything back.
I'm doing well, and apparently better than Roe, at least on a tech basis here.
Yeah. So where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Glencoe, Alabama, so I'm not broadcasting live from my usual mad science lair.
Okay. Let's see. What does EL have to say? And Ro, ready to learn all about you. Okay. So, do you have your physics lessons prepared? We can, put the slides up and.
Well, I have a whole Substack on my physics work,
Yeah,
fields.
I joined that, and then I looked. I was like, "Oh, this is so over my head." I'm like, "I'm sorry, Hans. I have to unjoin." I'm like, "I do not understand any of this. I'm a lowly chemist. See,
Well, that.
chemistry. Oh, chemistry.
Well, that's just applied physics.
You can say that, but I did not do well in physics or physical chemistry or calculus. Anything that you required above algebra, no, not so much. So I'm assuming that you use something above algebra every once in a while.
Every once in a while, I mostly stick with vector calculus. It's interesting. There are a number of physicists who think that people who just do vectors are cringe. They're not real physicists. You have to be using much more elaborate differential geometry or group theory or fancy algebras or things like that in order to be a real physicist.
So I actually let me do this in center view, so I'm actually looking at the camera instead of looking off to the side. There we go. I'm prepared now. I did want to talk about your textbook that you wrote because I think that's kind of neat. And who else do I know who's written a textbook? So tell us about that.
Well, I did a lot of work on ultra wideband antenna design. One of the things that I found really just utterly surprising is that people have periodically forgotten everything that they used to know about ultra wideband antennas. So when some of the earliest antennas were devised by a gentleman named Oliver Lodge in the 1890s, he came up with the idea of a biconical antenna, which is two cones that are fed from the tips of the cones, or a bow tie antenna that's just two triangular shaped elements fed from their pointy ends. But then 30 years later, everyone had forgotten about that, and people were reinventing the biconical antenna, even getting patents for an antenna that Oliver Lodge had patented some 40 years earlier in the 1890s. And then as that got rediscovered, all that was forgotten again in the 50s and 60s. So when I entered the arena doing antenna work, around 1999, everyone thought, or at least the conventional wisdom was, that if you wanted to have an ultra wideband small antenna, it had to be lossy, it had to be inefficient. That was the only way to make it well matched, was making it very lossy and throwing away most of the power so that it would have a good match to your transmitter or receiver. And I rediscovered a lot of those classic designs from the 30s and 40s, put a whole bunch of fresh embellishments on them, and ended up with a number of patents in that area. And I realized, everyone is just going to forget all this stuff all over again if no one writes it down. And that was my impetus for writing my book, The Art and Science of Ultra Wideband Antennas. So what I do in that book is I approach antennas from a variety of different perspectives, and I tried to provide a fairly comprehensive list of all of the ultra wideband antennas that people had been using. So long as you've got my book, you're in no danger of falling prey to antenna amnesia again.
So when I first start working at my job, in the early 2000s. Uh, Ro, sooner or later something will work tech wise for us, maybe. Um, so when I first started, there's a guy who I always talk to, and he's always like, "Listen, this is corporate America. Let me tell you how stupid things are." And he's like, "We suggested these things 20 years ago. They didn't work, but now the boss is all, we have to have new ideas, innovative ideas." He goes, "I just went back in my files from 20 years ago. They weren't working here then. They think I'm a genius. I already know it won't work, but it doesn't matter. I'm getting credit for it at the meeting. Then we'll try it. It won't work. And then they'll be like, okay, new idea." And I'll just pull out the next one. And it's at the point now, that was 20 years ago. Now he's long since retired. And now they're, doing we need new ideas. And I'm like, well, let me look and see what I did back in 2006. And I'm just recycling the same stupid ideas. I'm like, I know it won't work, but hey, I'll get credit for being smart. So there are benefits to
Well,
being old if you at least have a little bit of a memory.
Well, it's amazing how much material gets forgotten. One of the things that was particularly surprising to me when I realized the implications of this is to take a look at the textbook that all the physicists and all the electrical engineers were using in the 1940s to understand advanced electromagnetism. The book was Julius Adam Stratton's Electromagnetic Theory. Really good book if you're into that kind of thing. It's worth checking out. But you can compare the table of contents of that 1941 textbook to the table of contents of the modern book that's used in most physics graduate programs, Jackson's electrodynamics or classical electrodynamics. And what you'll discover is that Jackson presents an atrophied and dumbed down version of the applied electromagnetics that was in the Stratton textbook 80 years ago. So today's physicists have a worse understanding of applied electromagnetism than their predecessors of 80 years ago. And it's worse than that because, of course, the electrical engineers puttering about with Maxwell's equations have really made some enormous progress since the 1940s in understanding antennas and matching and link laws and electrically small antennas, the process of radiation. And all of that is effectively a lost art as far as physicists are concerned. They're not taught it, and unless they've made specific provisions to go in and study this stuff, they'll never see it in the physics curriculum. I got a PhD in physics without ever learning the fundamental basics of electromagnetism that you need in order to do antennas.
So Hans, I want to tell you, I have a rule of thumb. I've worked in chemistry for 30 years now. And my rule of thumb is if you talk to a PhD chemist and the first thing they do is say, "I'm Dr. Hans," they're worthless. If they just say, "Hey, my name is Hans," and I mean, the one woman, I'm like, "You have a PhD? Real?" I'm like, "No, seriously, this is a compliment." I had no idea because you just don't, you just let your ideas speak for themselves. You don't preface with, "I have a PhD," so thank you for that. Because the people who insist on, make sure you call me doctor, I'm like, you're an idiot. I know this up front.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I will tell you. When I went to graduate school once many years ago. In my first year there, at the end of the year, they said they had to pick one chemistry person who got their PhD and say, "This is the best PhD granted all year," and he gets to give special seminar on his research.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy did his seminar. He's an analytical chemist, and he measured something with gold. I don't know, don't care. I was an organic chemist, so who cares? I don't like math other than whole numbers. He went through the whole spiel, went through the whole thing, and then when he's done, the professor goes, "What was the oxidation state of the gold? Did it go from +1 to +3, or what was it?" And the guy looks at him and goes, "It's just gold, man." And he had no idea. I'm like, even me, who knows nothing about inorganic, I'm like, I know there's oxidation states, and it jumps, from 1 to 3, and back. And he's just like, "It's just gold." And like, "But what oxidation state is it?" He goes, "It's just gold." He had no idea what oxidation. He was the best.
It's amazing. I've run into graduates with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and even in one case, someone who was about to finish his master's in electrical engineering who didn't know Ohm's law. And I ask the simplest possible Ohm's law question, and they're lost. They can't answer it.
Okay. Well, as much as I'd like to make this whole show about old men yelling at clouds, um, we should probably move on to sci-fi or fantasy, or better yet, even book sales. So, how did the base book sale come about?
Well, I was involved in a wonderful group called the Conservative Libertarian Fiction Alliance. And they had this nice idea for doing promotions. Basically, once a month for a week, they would do a promotion where if you had a new release or if you had a book that hadn't been in a promotion for a while, you could put it on this list and we'd all share it and kind of mutually promote each other. Well, that eventually fell by the wayside, but I thought that was a really nice idea because there's only so many times you can go out to your Twitter followers and say, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, before they kind of put their fingers in their ears.
I really wish more people knew that. But anyway, go on.
But what gives you a respite on that is you can say, buy someone else's book. Look, here's this big sale. And yeah, I'm in it and my book's in it. And you should look at my book and buy it if you haven't already. But, here are a couple hundred other books that you should take a look at that are, based books that, don't follow the current trendy woke themes and tropes. And you might, if you like my books, you'll probably find something else in this big long list of hundreds of other books that you will also like. And I think that's one of the most powerful marketing techniques you can do, because it's everyone pooling their social media audiences, their mailing lists, and so forth to promote each other. And that kind of cooperative community marketing, I think, goes a long way, and it has a lot more credibility than you just hitting up random people on Twitter and saying, I've got a good book, would you like to buy it?
So it works much better than buy my book or else,
Right.
and you get a lot of credit when you actually support other authors instead of just make it all about you all the time, which is something else I wish some authors would learn. No names are going to be mentioned, except for maybe Roe, because he can't retort. But fortunately, we have EL here, and he asks more questions than either Roe or I ever do. So we're going to start going down the list now. Which of your books does the best? And please don't say wide antennas.
Well, lately it has been my novella, Split Decision. Split Decision was a novella. It was originally contributed to Daniel Humphrey's Z-Day anthology, Places Beyond the Wild. But that was a few years ago, and I decided to pull it out and sell it by itself. That's currently my number one selling book. In general, this year, the sales have been kind of split between the first two of my Hidden Truth books. The first book was The Hidden Truth. The second book was A Rambling Wreck. The premise of The Hidden Truth is that a high school student discovers that the books in the long-forgotten technical library in his Appalachian hometown, they don't agree with the online scans, and noticing that discrepancy is the inciting incident that sets him off on a quest to try to understand who is trying to change the past and to control the present and rule the future. In the second book, the hero goes off to be a freshman at Georgia Tech and has to fight a social justice conspiracy that's trying to take over the school. And then the final book that I've written so far, The Brave and the Bold, my protagonist goes to Jekyll Island for the evil cabal's summer seminar to try to infiltrate it and thwart their schemes. So it's an alternate history conspiracy techno thriller series, and they do pretty well. Now, I've also written a standalone novel, The Whys of Heart. It is a courtroom drama of transgenderism versus biological science that brings the Scopes monkey trial up to date for the 21st century. Basically, if you're familiar with the story of Inherit the Wind, which was a dramatization of the Scopes monkey trial, I took that, brought it up to date, to the present day, replacing transgenderism with the debate between the evolutionists and creationists.
Okay. Let's see. So Roe is still busy. Um, Talk about the sale. We were talking before we went live. Um, you have to manually put each one of these onto your Substack, correct? So it takes you way too long, way more than I'd be willing to do.
It takes a while, but a lot of the books are repeat appearances. Those are what I call the fan favorite books in the sale, and that's just a matter of copying and pasting the listing from a previous sale. So really, it's the new arrivals are the ones that take a little more time. But even there, it's just I copy the Amazon listing and copy the cover, and then get a link for the title so that you can click on the link. I use affiliate links, so I get 4% kickback. But more importantly, I can collect that sales data and keep track of how many books are sold and what are the best sellers. So the based book sale ends up being a bit of a competition between the authors to see whose book is the most popular, and an opportunity for readers to vote with their dollar purchases for the books that they think look the most interesting. And I collect that data, and in fact, this is the first sale I've specifically collected the top sellers and put them at the beginning of the sale so that you can see the result of all that crowdsourced decisions over the last couple of years, which books have bubbled up to the top to be the most popular based books in the sale.
Nice. I had a question and it just went away. Um, this is why we really need Ro to have a microphone that works. This has been simmering now for a year and a half, Ro, something like that. It's crazy. And it was working earlier before we went live, and then it stopped. Um, EO is going to give you no quarter, Ro, none whatsoever. But he is nice to Trinity, so you know. Let's see. What was I going to ask? Oh, I know. I was going to mention my next sci-fi book that comes out. There's actually all sorts of stuff that you have to use the high gain antenna and the low gain antenna, and I'm thinking, wow, I don't want Hans to read this book because I will get all kinds of. Well, by the way, this is incorrect.
Well, I do provide electromagnetic consulting for authors who. I've helped a couple of science fiction authors concoct plausible electromagnetic physics, and I designed a whole antenna system for Fenton Wood for one of his books. And I helped Rob Croce come up with a crazy scheme to use a crater as a parabolic dish antenna to focus signals. And if you got an antenna problem that you need to solve to make a plot point in your book, let me know. I'll come up with some crazy solution for you.
I just have they're traveling, and I have to have all their antennas go bad, so they can't communicate with Mars when they're out past Jupiter. But
Okay.
I do have an AI that's going crazy. So if nothing else, you can say, "Oh, the AI just disconnected it." So I have my easy out. But
well, you could always have something like a solar storm, and the resulting plasma shorts out all of the antennas and causes all kind of electrical damage too. And that might be part of why the AI goes crazy. Now that I think of it.
no, that's because the AI went crazy because the pilot who was named E.L. Montague made him go crazy. So,
people though.
Hey, Ro, you're back.
Yeah, finally got it sorted.
Woohoo! Welcome back, Ro. We were just about to start, saying nice things about you, but now we don't have to.
do it all over again. I'm sitting here amongst scientists with my communications degree.
So you have a communications degree, and yet you could not communicate, is what you're telling us.
Hey, I'm here, aren't I?
Well, 20 minutes late, but hey, there are worse things. I missed the whole show because I couldn't log on. So,
well, just responding to the questioner, yeah, that's a major problem with space travel that people generally don't address in their science fiction novels. With all the charged particles and the radiation, we're safely protected underneath Earth's magnetic field. But if you are in a spaceship or on a planet like the moon or like Mars that doesn't have the protection of a strong magnetic field, you'd have to either bury yourself down deep or have some kind of a magnetic bubble to deflect and divert all those charged particles away from you, so you don't get zapped by them.
Nice.
It's a lot less fun if you have to be buried, though. It really cramps the story if everybody has to be covered up with dirt.
I don't know. What God Emperor of Dune, the main character was a worm sitting on a throne. I mean, if he can do that, then surely you can write about a buried person.
Yeah, it's going to limit the movement, though.
It also made the book very unenjoyable. I always tell people, don't read that. Stop at Heretics of Dune, or I think that's the last, or Children of Dune. Children of Dunes. After that,
yeah, that was my impression. I really liked Dune, and I found the ending was a little bit of a letdown, but it was good enough that I wanted to read the next one. And I made my way through, I forget what the second one was, but it was, by the time I was in the third, I realized this is diminishing returns, and I gave up somewhere, I think, in the third book.
Yeah, Heretics of Dune is okay. Children of Dune was fine-ish. But God Emperor Dune, when you have a worm sitting on the throne, and that's your main character, I mean, he doesn't move. It's just every time after a conversation, there's 16 pages of, well, his eye batted this way when he said that, which clearly means this. And I'm like, no one cares, dude. Oh my God, get out and see some sun. But that's just me hating on authors, which is kind of par for the course on this show.
You don't hate on all authors, to be fair. Only the ones who are successful.
Right.
Okay.
Stephen King, George R. R. Martin, Joe Abercrombie. Yeah, these are standard. They don't know how to write a decent book for the most part. I wish I was just as bad as them and just as successful money-wise. But, details.
Well, that's one of the things that's been a real eye-opener for me as I've gotten into doing the based book sale. 10 years ago, I had my shelf of very well-worn paperbacks of my Heinleins and my Nivens and all the books that I would read and reread and reread on kind of a 3 or 4 year cycle. And there were only a handful of authors that I would actually go out and buy newly published books, mostly like the Bain guys like Larry Correia or David Weber. But now that I've gotten into the based book sale, it is amazing how much good stuff there is. Now, there's a lot of mediocre stuff too, but you can sift through it and find these real gems of books. I have absolutely no shortage of reading material. My big problem is finding the time to read all of the interesting looking new books that I've picked up by sifting through the based book sale and picking and choosing from the books I've got listed.
One of the things I like about indie authors is Tim McKay, who's been on the show multiple times. But he's written 3 books, and one is epic fantasy, one is horror, and they're in the same universe. He's like, you know what? I just wanted to write a horror, but it's on the same world, and I'm just doing different styles. And I'm like, what traditional author could get away with that?
Right.
Hey, and I mean, even our next guest is going to be Tobias Youngblood, and he wrote a prequel which was very much epic fantasy, and then his urban fantasy is more noir than urban fantasy. It's kind of a mix. And there, again, what traditional author could get away with this? So it's kind of the freedom to do what you want. And if it makes a good story, it makes a good story. Who cares? And you don't have to worry about what bookshelf does it go on, because it's not going on a bookshelf.
Right. Well, that can be a bit of a problem when you are writing across multiple genres, because you tend to collect readers who like that particular genre, and then it's hard to take them as you decide, well, I'm tired of science fiction. I'm going to write a Western, or I'm going to write a fantasy novel. I know some authors get around that by having a different pseudonym for each genre that they write in. I find it I kind of like that, because it's interesting seeing an author and getting comfortable and familiar with their quirks and idiosyncrasies, and see, okay, I've liked the science fiction dramas and the space operas this guy's written. Well, let me see how he handles a Western, and be able to kind of compare and contrast.
It's got to be kind of difficult from a business point, though, if you write in different genres and you have a different pen name for each one of them, because you kind of have to start the whole process over again, right? Getting people to take a chance on your
Nope, did I
books
lose you?
and kind of getting that recognition again. Yeah.
I think Hans is frozen on us.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there you are.
Okay.
You were frozen there for a second. Now you're back.
Okay.
Anyway, all right.
So, what are you mentioned the bestsellers you're putting towards the front now for the base book sale. What are the bestsellers? I know one of them has to be by Ryan Patrick.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's got a solid lead on everyone else. It's going to be hard for anyone to pass him. I think we've sold 135, 140 copies or so of his book in the sale. It's interesting how flat the curve is. It's it's not a Pareto distribution where a couple guys are getting 80% of the sales. It's pretty gradual. But in that top 10, he's currently leading the pack. We have a bunch of classics. I like to throw in things like Robert E. Howard's collected Conan, or Edgar Rice Burroughs' collected novels, his John Carter of Mars and Tarzan novels. I found King Solomon's Mines is doing really well. That's H. Rider Haggard. It's a wonderful book. It's the genesis of Indiana Jones, if you want to think of it that way. And then I also did Captain Blood, which is Raphael Sabatini's classic pirate adventure, and that's doing very well. I think it's in the top 5. Other books that are in the top 10, John C. Wright always does very well. I think one of my favorite books of his, One Bright Star to Guide Them, which is just an absolutely wonderful story about it's effectively a story of what would have happened to the child heroes of the Chronicles of Narnia if they were called upon in their adulthood to take up arms again to fight the same evil that they had fought in Narnia. So it's a wonderful, wonderful story. That one I think is somewhere in the top 10, and Some Wither, which is the Dragon Award-winning novel that John C. Wright did, is also up there and doing very well, along with Iron Chamber of Memory. Other books that are in the top 10 or 20 are After Moses by Michael Caine. That's one that I discovered through the based book sale when Michael put that book in a sale, I don't know, a year and a half ago. It's kind of like Firefly in space, but better, because it has a very principled captain who's trying to make the right decisions and make principled decisions facing some very difficult moral decisions as he's trying to make his way across the solar system in the wake of the collapse of the universal AI that had guided humanity for generations. Other books that are doing very well are, man, I'm having trouble remembering them all right now. I know M.S. Olney has his epic fantasy. I think it's The Sundered Crown, something like that. I haven't read that one, but it's a very popular book. But I collected all of them and put them put them up front. We also have some people who did very well last year, but haven't put their books in the sales in the last year. The last year's top book was Vox Day's A Sea of Skulls, and he has re-entered that. It's going to be interesting to see how far up the rankings he can climb in just one sale. He always does very well, is a friend of the sale, promotes it on his very well-read blog. He's got a couple of new books that are debuting in the sale. One is Death and the Devil, which is already a top release in satire, and also a novel from his Midnight War universe that he created with Chuck Dixon. So lots and lots of good offerings in the sale. Should be a pretty strong sale this time.
So I want to ask you, the classic books that you said you put in this, are those books that have run out of copyright, or?
Yeah, there are a lot of books on Amazon that are public domain, and either you have the Project Gutenberg version of it, or someone has taken it and added some illustrations and prettied it up and formatted it and released it. And they tend to be very inexpensive, 99-cent editions. That's where I got King Solomon's Mines and Captain Blood and the Robert E. Howard and Edgar Rice Burroughs novels to throw in there.
So just something for authors out there, if you're looking for something, I do a lot of Comic Cons with James Maxey, and he's written his sequel to The Wizard of Oz, where the Wizard of Oz goes back to the world, the U.S. He becomes the Secretary of War for Teddy Roosevelt, and he's stolen all the emeralds, and so he goes back leading an army against Oz in an army of Zeppelins through all of his wealth he stole from all the emeralds. And I was talking to him, I was like, dude, why do you not use this as a box set and print out, The Wizard of Oz, and then have your book and have it a 2-book set and have a little box? And he's like, oh my God, yes. And I mean, so all these classics that are out there, Sebastian Carlyle, he is writing his version or modern version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I'm like, again, why don't you have both these books, put them in a box set, make it deluxe, and one of the books is free, to you at least. I'm like, why? And so if you want to do that and you want to, you really want to latch your name to something that's tried and true and popular, you should look at doing that.
Oh, absolutely. I have a friend, unfortunately, his book, The Complete Martian Invasion, I think is the title of it. John Taloni is the author. He did this wonderful pastiche of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds and The Time Machine and First Man in the Moon. He collected like a half dozen different vintage science fiction stories and kind of wove them all together under the premise that they all happened, and then what? And he's got Albert Einstein and Marie Curie and Nikola Tesla weighing in on the consequences and how they're going to deal with the next phase of the Martians' attempts to invade, and how they're going to build a fleet to go back and bring the war to Mars. And it's a wonderful way to segue off of those. There's another author who took the incident in A War of the Worlds where the was it HMS Thunderchild, a dreadnought, attacks a Martian tripod. So he wrote a novel set in the War of the Worlds universe about the adventures of the crew of HMS Thunderchild. I'm afraid I'm forgetting the author's name there, but you can look up Thunderchild and track it down. It's a great story. I really enjoyed that one.
So if I ever, what I would love to do, I love Journey to the Center of the Earth, like my favorite of all the classics. And I'm like, I want to write, something, and after that, what happened or something. I have no ideas, but one day when I'm not writing all these series that I need to get finished, I will take that upon myself, and that'll be. But yeah, I love the idea of just these really old books that people are still reading 100 years later. Why don't you take that and add your book to it, and if it stands up, it stands up. If it doesn't, well, Those
Well,
are the breaks.
that's a very marketable premise. I mean, that's exactly what League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was all
Yeah.
about, taking those classic characters and then reworking them. Though I think that was more subverting some of the tropes
Yep.
of those stories instead of really being true to their heart and spirit.
Yep. So, but yeah, I don't know why more people don't do that, because I think that's especially if you're new and you're breaking in, you're like, you know what, you have your world, already defined for you. You don't have to do a ton of world building, and you can still get. And yes, Lucas, I'm there with you.
Yeah,
I
that's a good flick. You've actually seen that, Mike?
Yes, I saw it way back in the day,
Wow.
Mhm.
God.
back in the late 20th century.
As the kids would say.
In the
Yeah.
closing years of the last millennia.
Yeah. That's dark.
In the
So
millennia after the Roman Empire. Yes.
I missed about the first 15 minutes. I mean, I was listening to it, but not listening to it, if you know what I mean. Did we
We're
touch
used to
on
that.
any of Hans's books of his own?
Yeah, we talked about Antenna, the textbook, and then I was
Good.
like, okay, we really need to talk about something other than science literature.
Mhm.
So
All right. Let's
you
do
did
this
tell us
then.
briefly, but let's do it again since Roe's paying attention now. He promises.
Mhm.
Look at that. What is the hidden truth about? Again, tell us.
The hidden truth, the premise is a young high school protagonist is exploring the books in the long forgotten technical library in his Appalachian hometown, and he discovers that the text of the physical books does not agree with the online scans that are available, that are supposedly of those books. So tracking down and trying to reconcile what's going on there puts him on the trail of the people who are trying to change the past, control the present, and rule the future. And he uncovers at least the first clues of the hidden truth and what evil cabal is responsible for doing this. Then the second book, in A Rambling Wreck, he travels to Georgia Tech for his freshman year to get the education that he's going to need, and has to thwart a social justice takeover of the school. Both of those books are in the based book sale, and they're currently priced at 99 cents. So that's a pretty good value. The third book is The Brave and the Bold, and that is about the hero's summer internship, trying to get into the evil cabal's summer seminar that they're holding on Jekyll Island. And of course, the history of Jekyll Island plays heavily in that book. That was where the conspirators met to draft the legislation that led to the Federal Reserve. So I draw on a lot of that history in the Brave and the Bold. Now, I switched gears and haven't written the fourth. I have an outline and a bit written on the fourth novel, A Hell of an Engineer. But if you are interested in seeing where the story's going, the novella Split Decision is set another 10 years or so after Brave and the Bold. So you can kind of get some interesting clues for what's going to happen in A Hell of an Engineer, and what kind of life the hero is going to have as he graduates from school and goes off to be a professional multiverse adventurer.
Multiverse. Okay. So are these hard sci-fi or not?
You could consider them hard sci-fi. In fact, I take a lot of the electromagnetic theory that I've developed. I have some novel interpretations of electromagnetism and how it works that I work into the books. So there are some sections where there's some theory that's kind of just a plot point, but if you actually sit and work through the equations that I've described, you'll find that all the math actually does work out in exactly the way that that I describe in the book. That's really only for the hardcore, hard
Right.
science fiction fan. You don't have to understand vector calculus in order to read the novels.
That's good. That makes it a wider audience.
Yes.
Yeah, you're really limiting yourself. You have to have people able to do the math.
But that's what I try to do, even in writing my my science. Like I'm currently my other project is my fields and energy Substack at etherzar.substack.com. I'm writing a trilogy of books: Fields and Energy, How Electromagnetism and Quantum Mechanics Work and Where Physics Went Wrong. And I'm trying hard to avoid the math and to explain the ideas, to provide simple physical pictures and a narrative of what was going on. The first book is really all about the history of how we discovered and figured out electromagnetism and how it works and what the different interpretations are, the idea of treating electricity in wires as fluids and pipes, the idea of fields and what they are, and accelerating charges and radiation. So it's a very qualitative approach to the subject that still discusses the physical principles in a way that you can appreciate, whether you have the mathematical background or not.
So how did you get into writing stories about an engineer? I mean, obviously being an engineer helps. But how did you get into the soft
freeze
part
up
of
on you again?
writing? What's that?
No, you're fine.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
What was that? What I missed?
Ro was asking you a question, and then something happened. So go ahead,
Oh.
Ro. Try again.
Yeah. So how did you get into writing fiction from your day job? You can't hear me, I don't think.
I'm not hearing anything.
Okay, he wants to know, how did you get into writing fiction from your day job? Which is weird because I can hear both of you just fine.
Yeah.
Well, the first book I wrote was my Art and Science of Ultra-Wideband Antenna textbook. That was back in 2005. And I was writing a fair number of journal articles and conference papers and things like that. The antenna textbook was kind of a rush job, so I wanted to do a second edition to just make sure I had all the detail and brought it up to a level that I was happy with. And I did that in 2015. And it was fairly arduous doing that, and I was getting really tired of indexing books and having references and equations and so forth. And I thought, it would be a lot of fun to just write a fictional treatment of how these ideas that I'm working with were originally discovered in the 19th century and apparently have been forgotten or lost. And that was what inspired me to write The Hidden Truth. All of the things that I've come up with, my interpretations of electromagnetism, the premise of The Hidden Truth is that people like Hertz and Oliver Heaviside came up with all those things in the late 19th century, but there was an evil cabal that decided they had to suppress that hidden truth of how electromagnetism works. So effectively, my novels were a fictional treatment of some of the physics that I was working with. And I really enjoyed getting into writing fiction because it's a lot easier than writing nonfiction. At least that's my experience doing it. And so I cranked out the 3 Hidden Truth novels and my 4th novel, The Whys of Heart, and decided I really needed to, in parallel, I'd been working on writing a more thorough nonfiction treatment of my ideas. And that's what led me to Fields and Energy. Now, Fields and Energy was originally just going to be one book. But as I started serializing it on my Substack, I got all kinds of just great feedback and questions and things people told me weren't clear and they didn't really understand it. And by the time I had fleshed it out and added more material, it's grown now to the point where it's going to be a trilogy. All of book 1 and most of book 2 are already out on the Substack. Book 1 will be released in book form December 5th. It's already gone out to the people who backed the crowdfund that I did. But yeah, that book will be available December 5th. And hopefully I'll have book 2 finished and ready to go within a year, and book 3 a year after that. But of course, it's always hard to tell what the time schedule is going to be on those things.
Right. Yeah, Michael Vadney reached out. He's supposed to be on like January 4th. He's like, hey, I'm going to miss my mark. This editing's taking longer than I thought. Can we postpone this 2 months? And I responded, wait, an author missed a deadline? Amazing.
Never happened.
like you're one of us now. So yeah, you never know. Best guess is the best you can do.
That's one of the problems in the indie scene and the creative scene. Very few of us are, this is our primary full-time gig that we're working on. It's always a hobby project that is done in the time that can be spared away from our primary careers and our families. And since it is inevitably a little lower priority, it tends to be swamped by the course of events in the rest of our lives. So yeah, it's very hard to keep schedules a lot, and to find illustrators. When you try to collaborate with someone, I was very fortunate to find a very good illustrator who was able to complete the illustrations that I did in my novel, The Wise of Heart. I'd always wanted to try to do a graphic novel, and I thought a good way to get my feet wet on it was to just do an illustrated novel. So instead of a full page graphics for the entire treatment, just to commission a dozen really nice black and white line drawings to go in the book. And that worked out very well. And I may end up doing that again as I do more fiction.
Yeah, finding an illustrator is always a tough task, unless you come up with a good one. I don't know if he hears me at all, Mike, so you just carry on.
Okay, so when you're writing, do you outline everything, or are you a pantser, or somewhere in between? Are you a splancer?
I doubt that.
A bit of both. I was much more of a pantser initially, but what I discovered was when I write as a pantser, I end up discovering problems that would have been obvious if I'd just done the outline in the beginning. So then I end up having to do things like throw away the first third of the book and start from scratch. So I've become a determined outliner. I like to have a good outline of the book before I get started. The most recent novel that I did, The Wise of Heart, that's based on the Scopes Monkey trial. So I had the luxury of being able to take the actual trial transcript from the actual trial and use a lot of the legal exchanges and wrangling from that real life trial and work them into my novel. And then, of course, changing the testimony to be dealing with transgenderism instead of with evolution. So that was more a matter of editing down the vast amount of material in the trial transcript to something that would flow well in a much shorter novel treatment.
So how long is your outline? Is it like 4 pages? Is it 30 pages?
Typical outline, like the outline for Wise of Heart ended up being, I think, 5 or 6 pages. But that was because I was referencing bits of the trial transcript in it and not really fleshing out what was in those transcript sections. The outline for A Hell of an Engineer is around 10 pages or so. It's fairly elaborate. I mean, breaking it down, chapter by chapter, and then within the chapter, I will typically have somewhere on the order of 4 different scenes per chapter. There is a really nice. Oh man, I'm drawing a blank. There's a short story writing technique that was popularized by the author of Doc Savage, where effectively what he did was he was writing murder mystery stories and his goal was to hit a 6,000 word target and break it into 4 1,500 word segments. In the first segment, you'd introduce the characters, introduce the situation like you normally would in an introduction. He tried to set it up so if he had a murder mystery, you either had you had at least 3 of the 4 of an unusual murderer, an unusual murder method, an unusual murder setting, unusual murder victim. So you can use that general technique to write chapters where you treat each chapter as a 6,000 word short story and break it into 4 1,500 word segments where at the end of the 1,500 words, you have to have some kind of surprise that ups the stakes and increases the tension. And then at the end of the chapter, you are resolving some of the tension that you had introduced in that chapter, but you're leaving a lot of stuff hanging to go on into the next chapter. And when you treat each chapter as a short story that has to hold attention in and of itself, it's a lot easier to write fast-paced, engaging fiction that doesn't drag, because every 1,500 words you're going to be throwing a curveball and doing something to shift the course or do something different or have some kind of a revelation or threat or something happening.
You'd absolutely want to outline if
It
you're
was
doing that.
Lester Dent, the Lester Dent method of writing a short story.
I'm gonna write that down.
Cool. Sorry, I had to delete a comment. Let's see. So I know that you are visiting your in-laws for an early Thanksgiving. So do you have copies of your books to show us, or not? We'll give you a pass this time if that's the case.
No, not with. They do have copies of my books, and they've actually read and enjoyed my books. I was quite delighted that they went ahead and read my books, because it's not their normal kind of thing. But I'd have to go hunting to track them down.
So, well, we have a couple of them here.
Yeah, we can. We can throw these back up here real quick.
Ro is prepared for us. So we have The Hidden Truth, which is book 1, and a trilogy and a novella is out as well, and book 4 is coming. Is that correct?
Yes.
Look at that. Reading. I'm listening. I'm listening today. Woohoo! Rambling Wreck, which of course takes place at Georgia Tech. If you're a sports fan at all, you would have guessed that.
The Yellow Jackets.
The Brave and the Bold. And then there we go. That's the novella. Mm-hmm. And then you said you have a Fields and something. It was a physics thing, and it went over my head.
Yeah, Fields and Energy.
Here traction-wise, so it just goes right over.
That's not on Amazon yet.
Okay, and that's going to be is that another trilogy?
That will be another trilogy.
Okay, so
I hope it's another trilogy and not longer.
So you've got what, 3 books and a novella out. The Fields and Energy are coming. Will be another trilogy. You got an actual textbook, which is impressive as all get out that you've written that. But now your old people like me are not going to be able to pull let me just see what they did 40 years ago, and I'll be called a genius for coming up with this idea, because now you're going to have a textbook that has it all covered. So you're ruining that for the next wave of old people. But, I don't care. I'm already old.
Well, a lot of those youngsters haven't read my antenna books. So if you have, you'll be able to get ahead of the game and convince them that you are the source of all this ancient wisdom that I've compiled. Nice. And that's an earlier version of the cover. I've updated it a little bit, but yes, those are the three books in my Fields and Energy series.
Yeah, I was going to say your fiction covers are much more appealing. Going to translate that for me, Mike?
Your fiction covers are much more appealing, is what Rose said.
Well, I didn't want to make you have to write to the audience, and those covers are a lot more in line with the kinds of bland, boring covers you expect on nonfiction books.
I want to argue with you a little bit because I think if you put this on a textbook with that woman there on the cover of a textbook, there'd be a lot of people who would buy that. Or at least they'd have the book and they'd keep it for the whole semester before they tried to sell it back.
Well, quite possibly. I'll have to figure out how I can have her contribute to Fields and Energy and justify putting her on the cover there.
Ooh.
You better go quick before EL jumps in and says something inappropriate.
So Hans, thank you once again for being on. Base book sale starts Friday?
No, it starts tomorrow? Today. It's running live as we speak.
Okay. I need to put out a Twitter post
through Cyber Monday, right?
Nice. So I need to go get on Twitter and tell people about it. But there are a number of people on Twitter who are watching our show now, so you'll just think my post is
go check it out.
But you know what? That's okay. I will do it multiple times. How many books are in this sale this time around?
A little more than 250, so it's a pretty good sized sale. I've had larger sales, but this one is very solid, has a lot of really good things that I think will be very, very attractive, and a nice selection of new arrivals for people to check out.
Nice.
How often do you do it?
How often do you run the sale?
We run it 4 times a year. If you go to basedbooksale.substack.com and subscribe, I always put out a call for authors a few weeks in advance of the sale. And I haven't updated it yet, but before I end this current sale, I'll have all the dates pinned down for the 4 sales we're doing in 2026. So I'll have that information available for you to put on your calendar and look at your Kindle Unlimited periods, or and figure out what books you might, if you're an author, you might want to consider putting into the sale. Also, something that we started doing this past year is people have volunteered to step up and do the work to curate a niche sale. Instead of the free-for-all of my usual based book sales, we've had targeted niche sales. We had one on North American fantasy and one on alternate history, and we did a military science fiction sale, and we did a books for men sale. So a little smaller, more select audience, and those have gone very well too. And we'll continue doing that as people volunteer and step up to curate the sale. And when people do curate those sales for me, I let them keep all of the Amazon affiliate revenue that comes in from them putting that sale on.
So just want to say that this book is in base book sale. So if you like Star Trek meets Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Proxima Station will be on there. I think it's the second time I put it in. It did pretty well the first time, so we'll see. And then Becoming a Druid, which I put in like every year, and anymore everyone who wants it has it, but details. But they're both there, along with 248 other books. So we have the link has been scrolling the whole time below. So go there, find you some favorite books. They're all going to be cheap. Buy yourself early Christmas presents or early Thanksgiving presents, and then Christmas, come Friday, you can start that, or just buy them all. Buy them all now. It's nothing.
There you go. Save on shipping.
Yeah. So Hans, well, thank you for coming on. You took away from your Thanksgiving time with the in-laws, which I'm sure was a great sacrifice on your end. Thank you for coming on.
No, they might be listening right now.
He was smart enough not to say anything. So, I'm the one who looks bad, and where is that different from any other show?
That's fair.
But Hans, again, thank you for this. Your books are in the sale, correct?
Yes, they are.
So you can find Hans' works there. You cannot find the Antennas textbook, but if you want that, can't help you. Hans can absolutely help you. So thank you again. I think all we have left to do is to wait. Oh, go ahead.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure getting a chance to meet you online and to talk with you about the sale and about all of our books.
Cool.
Sorry you couldn't hear me.
Yeah. Ro says he wish he could have contributed, but he can't be heard except by me. The voice in my head is Ro. We now know this. But anyway, the only thing left to do now is to wave awkwardly and wait for
Thanks, Hans.
YouTube to actually cancel the video.
Thanks, everybody.
So, thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.
See you, Hans.